Hello, my name is Andre Ignoffo.
And my name is Raven Shaw.
We are gathered here today to talk about what it means to be rooted
and renewed
in our identities
in justice
and in the importance of upholding our human dignity within safe spaces in our institutions. Who are you? I am biracial, half black and half white.
I hear you, but really, Andre, who are you?
Well, growing up, being rooted in my identity was challenging. My whole life, I have lived in a white community with my white family because my black dad and I are estranged. Even within my family, I faced obstacles with the invalidation of my identity and feeling heard. I have always been the minority, constantly questioned, judged, and tested by people, especially those who I thought had my back. I'll never forget the time at my cousin's end-of-year water polo party where he and his friends debated my peculiar genetic DNA as if I was an alien instead of his family. There was another time when my teammate told my best friend that he said the N-word, and yet my best friend completely neglected the issue. When I gained the courage to talk with my swim coach on what happened, nothing was done as I anticipated. So Raven, how am I supposed to be rooted in who I am? Because you see, when you are alone with constantly no one in your corner, being able to stand up and say no is one of the most challenging things that can be done. You know, come to think of it, no one has had my back. Not my cousin, not my supposed best friend, and definitely not my coach. Now, just because we're both black doesn't necessarily mean our experiences are the same. So Raven, who are you?
I'm just a black girl trying to navigate a world that was not created for me.
What do you mean by that?
Well, like you said, my experience was different from yours. I grew up around a community that was and is unapologetically black. I've known since the moment I came out of the womb, this is me. And yet,
reimagine.
I've had my challenges along the way, like you, as the schools I attended and cities I lived in have always been places where I was a minority. It's that time. I remember in the 6th grade, I wanted to stop wearing braids because someone said they looked like burnt curly fries. I laughed it off. It's in 7th grade where at recess, I overhear a kid begin to say the N-word, and I look at him thinking, I'm about to call him out, but he sees me. And before I could say anything, looks and says, it was just a joke. And I laughed it off again, because don't you see? It was always just a joke, right, Andre? Right, y'all? I mean, that's what I told myself, because what would the teachers do? It's a joke. What would the administration do? It's a joke. This is how the world works, I told myself. I just had to deal with it. But guess what? They were never jokes, but I couldn't understand that. I wouldn't understand that. So I wondered, how could I get to a place of not dealing with it, but facing it?
We mentioned the hard parts of our backgrounds because, to be truthful, they are a part of who we are, our identities. Who are we? While we are rooted in this pain, as Father Brian Massengale mentions, the soul of black people and our oppression, we cannot deny and will never forget the constant joys we experience because of our race and our culture. We are both in leadership this year in the Black Student Union, an affinity space for black and brown students at our school, Saint Ignatius College Prep, a Jesuit high school in San Francisco. I am co-secretary.
And I'm co-president.
The BSU has been a shared space where we've both felt seen and heard. Unfortunately, last year, the BSU experienced an anti-black sentiment from some students at our school. I felt as though my existence didn't matter, and it was hard for me to process the hatred we were experiencing, because for me, unfortunately, it was nothing new. During that time, we felt alone and isolated. But out of that hurt came unity within the BSU and a stronger community that everyone within could lean upon.
We talked about who we are as individuals and as African Americans, but who are we as Ignatian leaders and Jesuit-educated persons?
We are called within our faith to support those who are oppressed so that they will no longer be on the margins. I believe it is within all of our backgrounds and experiences that we seek to commit to justice.
But what happens when we don't have the space or the people in power around us to voice the issues happening? I'm sure we've all had that internal voice that discourages us and tells us no one will listen.
Well, let me put it this way. Committing to justice involves standing up to the majority, challenging a person or system of power, even if this can result in social alienation or judgment. However, this is a risk worth taking. In order for us to be rooted and renewed in who we are, we cannot falter in the face of injustice.
You're right. As a society, we cannot hope to bring about change or progress without the help of everyone. Lila Watson, a Murray, Indigenous Australian visual artist, put it best. She said, "If you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound with mine, then let us work together." What does this quote look like within our institutions? Maybe it's creating a unity council that invites students of various backgrounds to have a conversation on their experiences at your school. Or it's having a town hall meeting to call out your school if it's not committing to the value of belonging. Imagine what would it look like for your schools to have specific safe spaces like affinity groups for minority students. Lila is simply saying that we all cannot be free if one of us is bound by injustice. No. It is when we are united as one that true freedom occurs. We must work together, no matter our positionality, because our freedom is intertwined with each other. If we ever hope to one day live in a world where we are rooted in our individual identities, we all must be rooted in our collective identity as human beings. Like Father Boyle said at last year's IFTJ, there is no us and them. There is only we. And let me tell you, we cannot do this alone. The BSU showed Andre and I that. We together in this room can show each other that.
So ask yourself, what are we doing in this space together as a whole here at the Ignatian Family Teach-In for Justice? Carrying all of our identities to this space, when we go back to our various institutions, what will we do to make our voices heard, to uplift the voices that don't get heard?
Now, let us be clear. We ask you all these questions not for you to look at our school as a model, because we're far from perfect. Rather, see our stories as a journey to being rooted in who we are and to being renewed through acts that prompt us to commit to action within our institutions. So, let's verbalize and say these questions together to acknowledge and uplift all the voices in this space. Say, who am I?
Who am I?
Who are we?
Who are we?
Who do we want to be?
Who do we want to be?
We must ask ourselves these questions because it is the answer to them that we must hold deep in our hearts with compassion.
So when we ask, who are you? Best believe we hear you.
Best believe we see you.
Thank you.